Good morning, everyone. Sue and Aaron Singleton here. And it's kind of a small group today, and expect hopefully some more people will join us in the next little bit. And Aaron and I actually shared quite a bit last time, so we're going to be more in the background and kind of continuing the discussion, but really would appreciate more feedback from those of you on here. It looks like there's going to be maybe around 10 people, which is definitely smaller than we had last time. And we're asking for everyone to keep in mind to be mutually respectful, but also we're going to try to limit people when they speak, to limit it to 3 minutes, because it could be that everyone wants to say something. A number of people never got to speak at all the last time we did this. And so that would be wonderful. And I know it's kind of, in some ways, difficult to do, but we've got to try to not allow this to become political at all in our discussions today. Again, mutually respectful, giving people a chance to give their opinions, and we may not all agree with each other's opinions either. We may have some differences of opinion, and that's totally fine. I think it's great to allow everyone a chance. So at the moment I have everyone muted, and so when you're not actually actively speaking and sharing, that would be good practice, you know, in terms of phone ringing, dogs barking, whatever, that would be helpful to remute yourself when you're done talking. So it's been quite an eventful couple of months. It all continues, and I think that the systemic racism that we have happening, there's still a lot of hope for that changing. However, it hasn't changed as rapidly as we would have hoped. But let's all maybe have a dialogue about what we're each doing, or what we can do with our intentions and how we are doing things. So without us kind of leading it in any particular direction, we're just going to step back, and anyone that wants to unmute themselves to start, go ahead. Otherwise, Aaron has some talking points if people are stymied about what to say.
I have a comment, I think, more than a question. Is that okay?
Yes,
sure.
Absolutely.
Okay. There's a piece of me that is concerned that what media is portraying is so far from the whole truth that, you know, I just, with all that's been going on in the last 6 months or so, we just have been constantly charged up into this fear environment, no matter what it is. It's just like fear is just seems to be the thing that is being triggered in so many different ways. And I'm just trying to understand and keep a perspective on, you know, it's just like if you were to watch the news, you would walk away from it thinking the world is a mess. But if you were to watch a balanced newscast that gave you information about all the beautiful things that are happening, all the good things that are happening, all the ways that people are helping each other and uniting and not dividing, I'm struggling with trying to find the truth and the balance. And it certainly doesn't feel like it's coming through the media. I don't know if anybody can reference a book or you know, someplace to go where you can hear more of that or experience more of that. And this may just be the place. I don't know.
Well, thank you. Trish.
Well, think of it this way. When the movie makers make a movie, they sensationalize different aspects of that movie to get people to come to it. They make a scary movie really scary, a funny movie really funny, a car chase type of scenario, you know, they make it outlandish. So the media is no different. They try to promote in their minds, or in, I would say, in their policy, what sells the news, what keeps people glued to the TV. In the past, when they have tried to do good news television, it failed. People didn't watch it.
Yeah.
Okay. I agree, there needs to be a lot more balance. Even when it comes to going out and interviewing people individually, and some of the comments that people make, whether it's about politics, coronavirus, or anything of that nature, it's not balanced.
Right.
So here we're talking about the policies of the newscasters, heads that have, these policies have been in place and things like that, to go out and find something sensational, because that's what's going to keep people watching. That's what's going to keep the ratings up. So we have to look at that. And even today we can talk about, policy. So not only policy of on television, but it is our state and federal policies that affect people of color adversely. And those have been in place for a very, very long time. And again, that's going to be, it's not just get out and vote. It's actually get a hold of your politicians and work with them to change existing policies, because there are policies that are on the books that are still not in favor of anyone of color. Okay, it's always about white supremacy. Even though it's an undertone of it, it's still there. It's been there since the beginning. Any comments on that?
Do you mind if I speak?
Yes.
Yes.
I also see that the momentum that was built around George Floyd incident, and then the solidarity with white people, it seems like things build up and then they lose steam and then people lose interest. So I agree that I think we have to really keep our eye on the ball to move policy, because once all of that dissipates, then sometimes people go back into their corner and then retreat. So I think it's important to, as you said, address politicians, make sure policies are in place. And we have to push for that, because it's not going to happen automatically without the work that we have to do to push those policies. I also saw, in looking at polls, kind of almost like a backlash where at one point it was like 60% of people were in favor of the protest and march. And then over time that started to dissipate. So that was a little bit disappointing to see, but hopefully people will continue to put those issues in the forefront instead of behind us.
Yes, and I would agree that there does seem to be less support for it. And I do agree with the earlier comments from Trish and some other people that the fact that the media is actually focused on the violent aspects instead of the peaceful protesters, there's just too much focus on that. And people are wearing out on that topic as much as they are on the COVID-19 topic. Unfortunately, there's just like viewer apathy in a way, and that's not good. So the work needs to continue to proceed.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and the protesting that is going on right now, that is peaceful protesting, is great. But how many protesters are going to be out there in the streets in Minnesota in January?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is where, again, we have to look at getting to your politicians and getting policy changes. You don't need to march in the streets to change policy, but you need advocates. You need people in high places to support you. And, the protesting, you can get some of that. But if you form an organization, get with a group that is seeking to change policy, and you show up in numbers on paper, especially when we're talking about at a time of voting, this is where you get to your city politicians, your state politicians, and eventually to the federal politicians. So we have to look at how we can work in that direction to change it.
Yes, That's true, because it is really the politicians, the elected officials, that want to keep their seats. And if they're pressured by their constituents, that's where we really can make more differences. Knowing exactly who your representatives are and pressuring them by email or written letters on certain things, because they want to get reelected. And if they are supposed to be representing the needs of their constituents. So that is doing things locally, really the grassroots approach, and then allowing it to spread across the United States better. That's kind of where we are.
I mean, I live in Los Angeles. I live in Burbank, and so my within 10 miles of me, it's it's a very rainbow coalition kind of thing going, and I would say it's great to want to goose your politicians, but I think this is a people's movement. You've got to get some skin in this. I go out, and you said what you want. Walk around your neighborhood. Early in the morning, when at dawn or 6 o'clock in the morning, there are people walking their dogs. There are runners, and you need to see each other. With your mask, you can do so much with your eyes and a head nod that just connects you as a human being. And I think we need to do more of that. Everybody wants to. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, so I'm accustomed to the media not giving a darn about me. And so that's not where I look to for truth. I look to see, how am I treated where I live? What programs? I work with a Family Promise of the Verdugos. They help homeless families. I work with young storytellers. They help kids to learn how to tell stories and how to express themselves. I can't change the world. I can make little ripples in my little world, and hope to reach out to people and hope they reach back. But it's not on them, it's on me. And, colored years are, like 8 white folk years, just on the daily stress of getting up and walking out of the house to get groceries. And it's always like that. So, you guys are a little tardy to the oppression party, but it's okay because now you know, and everybody's in this. Everybody's been at home at least 3 months where you really couldn't go out and do anything. And you had a chance, and that drove some people crazy. There are people that just, I had to call my therapist, and I've been retired for 2 years. I was like, I said, "Hi, it's me. I'm falling. Can you call me?" She called me back the same day.
Wow. Nice.
But this is not a, this is not a dress rehearsal. This is the real deal here. And people have died. There's so many Black people died when I tried talking about it. I don't even remember their names anymore because every day is something new. Yeah. So, you want to know what you can do, put yourself in it. Don't wait for the media to tell you what's going on. You can walk the streets. You can drive your car. I live in Burbank. I drive to the beach every once in a while. Just drive there and come back. So I have the illusion of freedom. I'm not really that free to go around. But we have to do these things for ourselves. You know what makes you feel good? If you do something for yourself, something for your home, and something for someone that you care about every day, you'll feel better. That's how I gauge my success now. If I do something for somebody that I care about, and not necessarily like a family member, it could be, a homeless woman, or a homeless man on the street. But, this is your time to really check your humanity and not be, to be a participant as opposed to an observer. We're not reporters now.
Right. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Anyone else have some further information?
If I may, I'm seeing this problem at several levels, and no one level can address the entire thing, of course. Of course, what Anna just said, we all have to have some skin in the game, and our version of doing that, I think, is just to be more vocal with those around us, especially those that are not the same skin color we are, to be more vocal about what we feel as as a person, as people, and to be able to share our hearts with others so that other people can see that we have a heart that needs, that needs the same sort of attention as their heart. But that's at one level. We're talking about the protests dissipating just a little bit. And we don't want to see that happen, of course, but I'm wondering, we're trying to nag our politicians for change, but have we actually quantified what that change is? We live in a system that makes racism invisible to us, and we like to change that system. But the quantification of that change seems very difficult, especially for those who don't want to face the system that they've created that oppresses. And so, so it seems to me that one of the more valuable efforts that can be made here is to actually quantify the changes that can be made from a policy point of view. I have no idea how to do this, but I'm noticing that this is a lack. We call for our politicians to make a change, yet none of us realize or can quantify or verbalize what that change should be. This is my take on it at this point in time.
Okay, thank you.
That's a good point.
Well, one thing that Anna mentioned was starting a ripple. Okay, we all have to do something. So we all start our own ripple. It's kind of like throwing a handful of pebbles into the pond and you have multiple ripples that overlap each other. Okay, so if we know of something that is wrong systemically in our society, sometimes we can even find things in the books that support it. And that's why it's never been changed. So we have to be willing to do some research to go into our system and look for laws and policies that were written 100 years ago that are still supporting what's going on today. You know, I recently learned about substandard materials, learning materials being used in different areas of the South. So when you're looking at people of color getting substandard material, this is an effort to keep people of color down where they are right now. Don't let them get the education and get up to a higher level, a higher place. Don't let them into the suburbs. So it's, where do we go? Who do we contact? What type of organization do we join or start ourselves to create that ripple to initiate that change? And then we can look at that right around our own communities. We don't have to go down south. We can find things in the, here we are north of Boston, so we have, a good mix, so to speak, but we still have issues. And those issues are what need to be addressed, whether it's in the schools or in the community itself. And I think if you look around, you'll find some of those same things that you can, work with in your communities. Yeah. And again, whether it's working with the homeless people or people that you already know are lacking in education, what can you do to help them to, upgrade where they are so that they can compete and they can be legitimized and recognized for the smarts that they have rather than being kept where they are.
That's actually a very good point, Aaron. The elements in our system that you mentioned, the separate education that's going on between the groups down south. The elements of our system that, insidiously support suppression of people of color are invisible to a lot of people. For example, in Florida and in Rhode Island, most of the people who are incarcerated are people of color. Now, we know that that has racism behind it, but once you're incarcerated, you're prevented from voting under a wide variety of circumstances. So this is an insidious way to suppress the voting of people of color by making sure that as many of them are as incarcerated and therefore disqualified from voting as it can be. And there are many other tricks of the trade, so to speak, I hate to refer to it that way, that would suppress the voting of undesirable groups, let's say. I mean, undesirable as labeled by someone else, but it's embedded in our system in an invisible manner. And when I speak of quantifying the changes that are needed, I'm referring to these sort of embedded systems that once light is shone on them, that they can be seen for what they are, a way of classifying our citizens from us to them and all the rest of that stuff. Any policy that separates an us versus them situation is suspect for this sort of insidious, invisible racism.
Yes, such as closing voting stations in certain areas where
Or
there
even
used to
putting
be
drop
5,
boxes.
there's now 1.
You know, when they said they're not going to put drop boxes throughout the states of Texas and North Carolina, except for 1 per county. Again, I saw this as a way of suppressing the vote. And so,
Yeah.
but these things are invisible to a lot of people. A lot of people feel that this is legitimate, you know, machination of a culture, when they don't realize how much it supports the invisible racism that everyone's complaining about at this point in time.
Yes.
Yeah. So, you know, if the policies that are in place now are to keep people where they are, keep them uneducated, poor, down, to keep them from having a voice. Okay. Now, if we look at that as a whole and we go back in time and see where some of these policies originated, and they are still written and on the books of, you know, in many states. So it's not hard to find them. So we can find them, we can work with politicians to change them. But you have to look at what that does to the country. The people that are in power continue to have someone that they can say, these people are not good enough, not as good as me. Okay, but they won't give you a chance to elevate yourself. So they're keeping that so that they will have someone that they can feel superior to. Okay, now if everyone in this country got the same level of education, got the same opportunity, then we would elevate the country. We wouldn't have some of the problems that we have, because there wouldn't be no us versus them. It would be we are all equal. That was one of the things that I observed when I was in the Army and stationed in Germany in the 70s. It wasn't about Black Germans, Indian Germans. Everybody was just German. We've never reached that point in this country. We've always kept the races separate, okay? And that's something that has to change, but that will only change when everyone is better educated. I mean, when we look at some of what we're seeing right now in politics, and they're talking about the uneducated white women and men that are voting for Trump, this is the same thing that we're talking about as far as the country, to raise the country up, to eliminate racism. We have to all have same education, or at least the opportunity for that education. Through education, we elevate each other and we elevate the country.
I agree with that. I agree with that part of it. But I mean, nowadays with computers and, you know, access to the internet, we have public libraries. You know, there was a time when everything was in book form. Even the World Book Encyclopedia would come out every year with like an annual update on their, you know, their basic stuff. We don't have to do that anymore. You can go to the library. I have a subscription to the New York Times. And I got that by donating some money to my local NPR station. So I killed 2 birds. And I have access to not just the regular papers, but the archives. And that's where it's really rich. It's going back and seeing how we even wrote. Our conversation has changed since then. The way that we communicate has changed since then. And, you know, I like I said, I can only do so much. Everybody that I talk to from now until November 3rd, I will talk to about voting. I will, you know, I'm not trying to convince anybody to do anything they don't want to do, but I do believe that, you know, we should vote. And again, growing up in Birmingham, I know how important that is. Living in Chicago, I know how important that is.
Yes.
And so it's on, I mean, like I do me every day. I do something, you know, those three things every day. And it helps me feel like I'm contributing. You know, I didn't, you know, I wasn't the fastest sperm so I could get here and sit on my behind. I came out of there going, I'm going to be a person and I'm going to see what's happening. And, you know, that's what we have to do. It's not someone else. If you can give kindness daily, every day, it's possible to do that. You will feel better. I turned off these little dingers, like these little notifications on my phone. My phone doesn't ding at all. I don't text. I don't text people that know me. No, if you call me and leave a message, I will call you back within 24 hours. My voicemail says so. But this texting is not a means of communications, and people get, it's too easy to get twisted. You know,
Right.
You know, people have broken up families and relationships over misunderstood text. And we're afraid, you know, our fear is ruling us. You're letting your fear run you away from being honestly communicating with people. And we can do that. You know, you just don't give in to the fear. It's not work. It's not going to work.
Okay.
Fear does not work.
But see, you started your ripple a long time ago. Okay. So when you started saying that you wanted to get out there, you wanted to see the world, you wanted to be somebody, you started your ripple. Okay. So you got a head start on a lot of people.
Yeah. Some people have not, they're just about to start that, or they just have
We were all the fastest sperm. We all fought. We already beat a million other beings to get here to this planet, to get to be in our parents, to be, you know, to be alive and to breathe. So you're already ahead of the game. You're here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you got, you know, there were some sperms playing cards that never got out.
Right.
So, you know, so we're out here and we, you know, and you have that power. Don't let your fear make you believe that you don't have power. You can smile at your neighbor. You know,
Absolutely.
you can let somebody go in front of you at the grocery store. There are things that you can do that will fill you up. And I think that if you do more of them, you'll see it'll get better.
Okay. Now, what you're saying right now, hopefully, is inspiration to some of these other people here today to start their ripple if they haven't already. So it is about, like you're saying, you got your subscription to the New York Times, you go to the library, you're educating yourself, you're keeping up with things, you're helping out in the community. And it's a matter of how many of us are doing that. Because if we are, then we're starting our ripple. And if we're not, then we're kind of sitting there playing cards. Okay.
And certainly, I mean, our life is a life of service in terms of what we do, the spiritual healing and the holistic healthcare that we do. We serve so many, and every single day we find things to be grateful for in our lives, and also something of kindness and education. The whole reason we did the original roundtable and then this one was because we had so many of our white clients saying things that made no sense. It showed they had no understanding of why people were marching in the streets. And some of them, I'll say innocently, in their white bubble all their lives didn't have anything that would help them to realize the way life really is. And for whatever reason, I felt this long before I met Aaron and we became an interracial couple 25 years ago. And so we've lived that difference. It elevated my understanding even more in our 25 years as a couple. But it's fascinating that a lot of people just didn't understand it. And I ended up almost in arguments with some of my white clients where they were just not seeing it. So that's when I turned to Aaron. Okay, it doesn't need to be done during client sessions. We've got to do something where whoever's willing to show up, we can do it this way.
I wanted to go back to what Aaron has said a little bit about education, because in my own life, I found education to be extremely powerful. My father said that education was the great equalizer. He was a poor man from Jamaica, and he insisted that his children especially his sons, get as much education as possible. And I'm the product of that. And I've been very blessed by that education. I live in essentially a white environment socially. And without that education, I would not have survived as successfully as I have. So, but, you know, and then going back to what Anna said, we all have to touch someone, because the movement has to happen in two places: in our policies and in our hearts. There are many of those who do not have the heart to address this racism issue because they cannot see it. And, you know, and touching them in a way that Anna is suggesting helps them to see it, or helps them to understand that there's a person behind what they had not considered before, that's being affected by what they had not considered before. But the education point of view, you know, the suppressing the education in various communities of color and all the rest of that stuff, this is one of our insidious policies that we can do a lot about by addressing our politicians. The politicians must know that our education is an illegitimate form of stratifying its citizens. Education should be equal for everyone. And that would help, you know, declassify some of the layers of society that we have that are based on color. And so, you know, so I want to give homage to both what Anna is saying and what Erin is saying. Anna is saying about touching people directly, and what Erin is saying about education. Both of those are extremely valuable, but I'm still curious as to what policy changes, to quantify what policy changes we would ask our politicians to make.
Okay, well, I think what we have to do is first, we have to do some research. We have to look in the books to find out what policies are there that they are following that may have been written 50 or 100 years ago. And those policies have to be changed. You change them on paper, but it's another thing to implement them, because they're already in the heads of the people that are out there and that are doing this. So the only way you do that is, again, some of it is what's being done right now. Some of it is really getting out there on the streets and marching and protesting and letting people know that things have to change. And the only other way to really do that is, again, going to vote out some of the people that are, you know, I wrote a thing not long ago talking about Mitch McConnell, you know, kind of a good old boy from the South, not wanting change, not believing it's needed. And there's a lot of politicians like that they just like it the way it is. They want to move along slow. If it changes too fast, they can't handle it. Okay. And change does not have to take another 100 years. Right. If it could happen in the next 5, let's say, as long as you have people in place that are willing to implement it.
Yes, and in my opinion too, another aspect of that is, at the moment, there's only token people of color in too many positions, not enough really widespread diversity in positions of power. And that's where more people need to be willing to speak up and speak out. And I really, to further what Anna said, to personalize everything, I think is important, that we are people first. And in some cases, Erin and I might be the first interracial couple that someone has met. So how we behave and interact is super important. And what starts happening with white people is that they first say, well, I don't really like Black people, or I don't really like Mexicans, but gee, you're okay. I like you. And so that's still racist, but it's a step in having met someone that may start changing your mind and your heart.
Or the big thing is, you're different.
Erin's heard that a lot. Oh, but you're different. You're not like them.
I hear that a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we it's funny, we all hear that a lot.
Yeah.
I worked for a huge I worked in the entertainment industry, and I worked for you know, one of the biggest companies, and I was the only colored person in my building for the first 5 years.
Wow.
And there were like 600 people in that building, and I was the only colored person in my in my group for over 10 years. And I mean, okay, Halloween is coming up. I actually had a guy come up to me and say, would you be offended if I dressed up as a black guy for Halloween? I said, which one? And he walked away from me.
Wow.
So, that's what I'm saying. It's like, if you don't, I have to have a sense of humor about my oppression, because otherwise, I would be buying guns and shooting people, or get a job where I could poison white people or something, something crazy. But, we have to do it. I challenge everybody that's on this call, pick one thing. You're going to do this whole politician thing, pick one thing. Go at it with every bit of zeal and gumption and desire for change that you possibly can. One thing, because how's that saying go? You can have everything, but not all at once.
Right.
If you pick one thing and somebody else is working on one thing, at some point you're going to meet.
Right.
Yes.
You're going to come together. You're going to overlap.
Yeah.
So, like I'm telling you, pick one thing, people. And stick with it. So it has to be something that's important to you. Don't just pick something because it's hot and sexy and fancy right now. Pick something that you really care about.
Right.
And I guarantee you will see the change in yourself. You will see the change in others around you. Your heart will be full. Nobody will ever be able to say anything negative to you. That doesn't just Teflon off of you. But you got to pick one thing, otherwise you're just sitting around, jerking yourself off every day. It doesn't make any sense.
Right. Yeah.
Now, a few people haven't had a chance to say anything yet. So we encourage some of you to either comment or ask questions or share, because there's been a few of us doing a lot more talking. So would like to encourage some other people to have an opportunity here.
I'll jump in. Oh, go ahead.
Joyce, your microphone is off. You have to turn your microphone on.
Is it on?
Yeah,
now it is.
we can hear you now.
It's on now?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, you're talking to a tech stupid person. Since our last roundtable, I've been thinking a lot about this issue, and I know Sue and I have talked about it quite a bit, and I know Lee and I have talked about it quite a bit. And I very strongly feel that that the energy for change needs to come from people, white people.
Yes.
And imagine how powerful a Black Lives Matter gathering would be if there were no Black people in it. It was only white people saying it's, we want the change. We need the change. I also see my own life, 67 years. I lived in a lily white life. I've traveled a lot. I've been in 7 states. I've taught. I had Black students, but I did not have Black friends because they weren't there. I made it to 6 or 67 and thought, wow, I missed something. How did I miss the Black community? How did I miss all that? But it happens. And I think there's a huge, huge majority of people in this world like me who have just missed it for whatever reason, where we move, where we live, what our jobs are, did not bring us into contact with the reality of this Black world. They're not bad people. We're not bad people. And if you asked any one of us, how do you feel about that? It's terrible. It's awful. The way those people are treated, it's just a terrible thing. But how do you support that change when it isn't in your neighborhood, when it isn't in your world? You say it, you take a stance on it, but where do you implement that? Where do you voice that? How do you make something change that isn't in your world? And so I see that as a huge obstacle.
And that's a great point, actually, Joyce. But what I've noticed is it is in our world in terms of back when I was a banking executive, you all heard last time how I lost all my executive privileges when I married Aaron, that stripped down like I was a nobody all of a sudden overnight from being a star employee. And so when we're in our white world, there are people talking against Jews, against Native Americans, against Indians, against Black people. And that's where, when we're in an all-white organization, you're going to hear people talking and behaving in a racist manner. And that's a very important time to jump in and say, wait a minute, I just heard you say that. And I'm going to call you on that.
It is. You're right about that. But in terms of actually it being on your plate, other than that, it's not on your plate. And so I saw that, looked back at my own life and thought, how did I get this far without taking a stance here? How did I not say anything? How did I not do anything? Quite honestly, I was one of those people that if a Black person told me, I get stopped all the time and you don't, you know, I get, my family gets arrested when yours gets let off. That I believe that happened. I believe that happened some percentage of the time. I had no idea to what degree it really was happening. No idea. And I wouldn't have believed it if it weren't for the cameras in people's hands these days who took pictures, and I saw it for myself that it does happen. It's even Black people turning on Black people that I have seen. That has just been horrible. That's been a wake-up call to me. So I know that I strongly feel that the answer is in the hands of the white people. I remember in the last roundtable, Carrie said, people came to her and said, what can we do? And she said, don't ask me, don't ask us, we're exhausted. And that really affected me. And I thought, what more can any race of people do to bring attention to their oppression? What more could they possibly do than the Black people in this country have done? What more can they do quietly and peacefully? Nothing. There is nothing more they can do. It's beyond that at this point. It's up to us, the white people, to do that at this point. We have to take that baton and finish this race. I really think we have to do that. So yes, it's calling people on a daily basis when you hear these little comments. It is showing up to a rally if it's in another town or another state. You have to go. You have to get in your car and you have to go. If it's not in your neighborhood, go find the neighborhood that it's in.
Right.
And, yeah, it's really making a huge change for the white community, I think.
But
Yeah.
how about having it in your own community? And I mean, I know that takes courage too, to be able to do that. And I don't know if you read that article of the one in, was it in Ohio, where that group, the individuals came out to do a Black Lives Matter. And then it just was such a negative thing that ended up happening between the two parts. So I think it also takes courage to do that. And then I know you said that in your thing that you haven't had reached out, but it also takes courage to like create the dynamics and the relationship, stepping out of that comfort zone and creating that, because groups are out there, organizations are out there that individuals can join to meet other, have cross-racial relationships. I think that also could be something to do that. And if you can't do it with your time or that stuff, now with this virtual world, you can meet individuals, you can be part of groups, you can do stuff, which requires us to kind of like think outside the box of how we're going to reach out to help folks. And then to help I think it's just to help Americans, because I think that's got to be the place that we have to just help each other. And then the other thing I was going to also add is that none of this stuff is like, if we have a great idea, as Anna said, that we're passionate about, more likely if you Google, somebody else has that same passionate idea. So then don't reinvent the wheel, find somebody else that's participating in it and help them. And then from there, that, and then they say not only help through your time, through your money, through your resources, through, you know, creating community, creating networks, setting people up, you know, someone that might be that. So it's like, that's how we're going to be able to do the part and understand the different aspects and create more equity. And then lastly, I've read like 2 books that have like impacted my life besides a bunch, but Caste is one where it looks at the different kinds of things of historically what has happened in the United States. And then Van Jones wrote this book about how do we kind of bring people together. And we have lost like rural America. Like we have lost, you know, there's this like we're blessed to be in like Massachusetts or whatever area that we're in, that we're a lot more open than, but there are individuals that feel that they're left out of the system. So we have to figure out a way to create bridges back to do that part. I know it's not my calling. I'm more to the point of where Lee was talking about, given my background as a lawyer, like helping individuals who have been, my newest thing is like helping individuals who have been through the system so that they can vote. So if it means sealing their records, having them have access to jobs, having to do that, it's there. But when we go and we think about it and we think, oh, who are we helping? We realize that isn't only only one particular individual that we're helping, but it's across the board. More likely it's someone from a socioeconomic place that also needs to be helped. So I know that I kind of went on different kinds of things, but just saying that accumulation. And then a place that I know that can use a lot of help is the healthcare. And that's what Ibram Kendi has brought out with regards to their like healthcare for all. Other countries have a healthcare system that's helpful for all. Why do we not have that in the United States? And why do we still keep having discrepancy towards that? So that's another area that could use the help. And it has to be across the board. I mean, I'm grateful that I'm in Massachusetts, that individuals here are able to have you're able to, you know, tap into mass health, but we have to let go of the stigma that it is okay to participate in a program in that. And we have to change the ideas or these notions that you have to be at a job so you can have healthcare. Why can't your healthcare transport with you if you do from there? Why do you only have to have it that? And then we can see like the essential care individuals don't have access to that. And we need to have, so there are so many things that are tied into one.
Yes, thank you, Nadine. And you bring up a good point that you're doing it through what you do for a living. You're applying it in a way. We do it in the way we make our living, that we touch things in that way. And so each of us have to find our way. And if you're retired, then find another way. And whether it's to financially support the organizations, but continuing to educate yourself, or whether it's to show up either online or physically in a place. And when Aaron and I first moved to Amesbury, Massachusetts 19 years ago, Aaron was the only person of color in the whole city. And now there's still not huge numbers. I don't really know, but we actually have Black neighbors, right? In fact, they're a mixed couple down the street, right on our same street, which is cool. But as we drive around, we now see more people of color. So but we each can do it in our own way. And last time, but I'm not super tech perfect, I uploaded last time resources for white people to really become more educated. So if some of you weren't on that and didn't get to download it, shoot us an email at info@thewaytobalance.com, because our office manager, Veronica, could send it to you on Monday or Tuesday. I'm just concerned I'm going to shut down the whole Zoom meeting if I try to find it and upload it while we're on, because I have been known to accidentally do that before.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, in this area, where we are, as well as in other areas outside of Boston, you will find that, there are people of color that are moving away from Boston to the suburbs or to these other smaller cities in order to get away from some of the racism that is in their area. And out here, we're finding the communities, because these are small New England towns, they're very accepting of people of color. And we're talking all people of color. All right. Now, going back to what you were saying, Nadine, about educating yourself, I think that what you have to do is educate yourself, and then you have to make the effort to educate others. So whether it is through something like this with Zoom, or as you said, joining an organization that's already out there, because it is easy to find things on the internet these days, and people that have already started their Ripple, and sometimes you can just join their Ripple,
which is a great thing. Yeah, Google searches work really well. And I'm finding on Facebook, you've got to be really careful about what you read, because once you've read something, you're going to get more of that. So I'm hesitant to get involved in too many of those Facebook posts. I tend to not respond to anything about politics or anything about COVID-19 at all on there. So that's probably not the greatest place to search, although there could be some good groups on Facebook about this kind of dialogue. But a Google search for things in the area could be really helpful.
Yeah, and Anna, we're going to use your catchphrase, start your Ripple, if that's all right.
Yeah, I like that. Start your Ripple. That's a,
well, thank you. Okay, I'm gonna copyright that. I'm gonna be having T-shirts made. You can email me. The T-shirts are $45 a piece, and no charity will be taken care of.
All right.
I'm sorry. I was channeling my inner Trump. Sorry about that. I'm done. I'm sorry.
No, it was cute.
Again, it's interesting to see this problem at the various levels that it exists. For example, what Joyce said about it not being present in your everyday world and feeling a bit more compromised and trying to do something about it because of that. But looking at racism as a condition of the mind or a condition of the heart, I deal with ageism in our society quite a bit. I myself try to address the ageism that occurs. This is just another form of ism. There are many isms in our culture. Sexism, misogyny, racism, all sorts of classifications that are going on. And at the heart of each one of them is basically understanding or not understanding our differences. I mentioned this last time, just simply not understanding and accepting our differences. None of us are the same, and that's okay. But in the way many of our elements of society have been constructed, we're not the same, and that's not okay. So there has to be some way of making differences, because I'm an extremely different individual than anyone you'll ever meet, as are all of you. There has to be a way of making those differences nice, acceptable, in fact, expected and warranted and useful. And so, and once we can understand that we're all very different people, that as Anna says, we will address the problem one way, as Erin says, we'll address the problem another way. It's all necessary because because it exists at several levels. And anything that anyone can think of, it's automatically necessary.
Well, it's through our differences that we as a people, as a country, are stronger.
Absolutely.
And so when we can all blend our differences together and all acknowledge each other's strengths, this is where we become this unified nation, as strong as it can be.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because that uniqueness that each one of us brings, you could even take it back to a base level of personality differences, even though what we're really talking about today is racial differences, that when you have people that are very detail oriented, working with people that get the big picture, well, what about if you have someone that's experienced certain things? And last time I used the example of how Chevy named the Nova car, which thinking of the star, and then they tried to market it in Latin America and other Hispanic countries, and that means it doesn't work, it doesn't run, Nova. And if they had anyone of Hispanic origins or Spanish-speaking origins to be involved in the process, they would have said, oh, it can't be named that to go there. So it was a total flop. And it's things like that where you need to really think about how knowing where someone's coming from can really be a benefit. To simply ask someone, Well, what's your perspective on this? You grew up differently than I did.
You know, Sue, I came across a paper that I wrote recently. I came across it recently, and I wrote it quite a while ago when I was working in the Native American community in Alaska. And I had to take a diversity class in order to be a teacher there. And when I got to the end of it, the synopsis, it was a critique of a writing, and the woman who had done this writing on discrimination clearly had no time for white people and what they had done to her community. And as I was writing this synopsis, I realized I could have just plucked out one of the words, Native American, and put in Black. And it was, what I said was, you know, we've been in a place where it's a culture saying, you're doing this to us. And it's another culture saying, no, we're not doing that. Or they're saying, they're either digging their heels in, knowing, yeah, we're doing that, and we're not giving you the power. Or they're in some varying degrees of coma, you know, that like, whatever, you know, I've got power, that's all I know. And another culture saying, you're doing this, and no, we're not, and yes, we are. And it gets to the point where I wrote, it does not matter anymore. It gets to the point where it doesn't matter that I think you're doing this or I think you're not. It gets to the point where the culture of power has to say, you know, what's important is not whether I'm really doing it or not, or whether I think I'm doing that or not to you. What's important is that you think I am. That's what's important, is that you think I am doing this to you, and I need to do something about that. I've got to change something. I've got to know you. I've got to know where you're coming from. I've got to know why you're thinking that. I've got to care. I've got to care because I don't want you to feel like that. I'm not doing that, and I want you to know that I'm not doing that. So there's this whole shift in attitude that has to come, and it has to come with the culture of power.
Yes.
It has to come with the culture of power to start caring about changing the way you see what I'm doing. Now, that's one thing, of course. Then there's the whole structure that was built that you've talked about, the system that is in place. And at this point, in a lot of ways, I think the system is oppressing, and not necessarily a lot of the people. You know, that may not be a reflection of what the people feel anymore. The system is in place and it's doing that. Yes. So it's a matter of, I think a lot, as Lee said, how do you change that? How do you get in? How do you even know what facets of this system are doing that in order to say, I need this changed, I need this changed, I need this changed. And it does need to be the culture of power that does that change. They have to
comment on what you're saying, Joyce. First, I want to say I admire your bravery in saying some of the things that you said, and recognizing that, okay, I'm in this all-white environment, and you know, I think that is something that some of my white friends have said. And the other thing I wanted to mention, going along with that, I think it does take. My husband and I have said, I said to him, it's going to take the people who have control and power, which in our country is white people, to really recognize that and to really be the ones to really look at it and start to dismantle the system that, you know, has been put in place against people of color. And to also comment on other people mentioning about exposure. So I work I'm a nurse practitioner in pediatrics, and I would say majority of the places, I've worked in different states too. I'm in Pennsylvania and in Philadelphia, and also work in South Jersey. And the majority of the practices I've worked with have been mostly white. And when I was in I presently work in South Jersey, which is a very like working class area, poor to working class. And then I worked in Michigan in a city called Jackson, which is a really small town, very similar demographics. And I've been doing this work for like 30 some years. And the population I'm working with now in South Jersey, I feel it's a little discouraging because, of course, you know, I'm in my 50s. So, but my patients, of course, are younger people having kids, so 30s, you know, 20s to 30s, and maybe 40s. And I'm a little discouraged because I've taken care of some of these kids from birth, from the time they've gotten home from the hospital to almost 20 some years of age. And some of the racism, some of the things that people say, and I've been their only provider. This is the person they choose to see me. Yet they will say some of the things that, you know, it's just like these little daggers in your heart all the time. It's very discouraging. And so I always think, okay, the younger generation, and I do think that there's definitely more of a move to positivity in that group. But at the same time, I get discouraged just because they still are carrying on some of the same things that they hear. And like I said, they're in contact with me. You know, of course, I'm the quote unquote exception to the rule, I guess, in their mind, as far as Black people are concerned. So it's just a little bit disheartening, unfortunately. So sometimes having contact doesn't always change people's mind. And race is a hard thing to talk about. Like my husband and I have a hard time talking about it. Like if it's up to my husband, he doesn't like to talk about it at all. So I think it's hard to kind of budge that in our society.
Yeah, and it does hurt, those words that get spoken or the activities, and it still occasionally will happen to Aaron that he'll show up someplace and they're like, oh, you don't look like you sound on the phone.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to piggyback a bit off of what Gilda and Joyce has said, and a little bit of what Anna has said too. I want to try to merge these 3 points, some points together. One of the reasons why it's hard to talk about racism is because people feel attacked or offended when you call them racist, and that makes it hard. When you put on the defensive, it makes it hard. So one of the things I started doing, I started to explore this concept, racism without racists. And that goes back to living in a system which makes racism invisible to us. Many racist people have such great, good hearts. They are good people who have no intention of being the racists that they are. And they fall into that particular position in an invisible, almost unconscious manner. Now, when you go and call these people racists, you're going to get a lot of pushback. And so I've started to explore talking about racism by not calling a person racist, but we're all victims of this to some degree. We're all victims of the system we live in. Victims is the wrong word there. We're all touched by the system we live in, and so have they. They've fallen into their racist views from their environments and all the rest of that stuff. And so seeing the good hearts behind all these racists helps you to speak to these racists, which I try to do. I live in New Hampshire, which unfortunately appears to be one of the more racist states in the nation. I know that comes as a surprise to many people, but I've been living here for almost 30 years now and I've concluded that. But if I were to go around calling people racist, I wouldn't get along very well. Instead, I have people go around trying to understand how I feel as a person living under the system that they agree with or they help put in place or they don't understand. And so why am I stopped by, when I drive my red Mercedes, why am I stopped much more than they are when they're driving their white Toyota? I just would think that talking about racism is going to be difficult if you're calling another person racist. And a way to avoid doing that is to understand that there's racism without racists, and that gives you an avenue to talk to people.
Yes, and I mean, even using my late father as an example, and he didn't even realize some of his beliefs and his attitudes. He didn't even know they were racist. And so it became a gradual educational process. And did he die totally anti-racist? No way. But we made inroads, and you're right. It's important to try not to get someone on the defensive. So we tried to do so many things by example, or asking him questions without labeling what he was saying. So I say, do you realize what you just said, what that sounds like or feels like to someone of this background or of that background? And that's how we chose to do it. And it gradually worked, but it was definitely not a perfected job by the end of his life, but we made progress.
I just want to say, based on like what Lee is saying, I mean, I know there's so many different things that are going, that are being said, but I think it also is like, how does one define racism and how does one define anti-racism? I think that we get so wrapped up sometimes in assumptions that we don't even take a little moment to say, you know, like, explain to me what you think your definition is, right? And then once we know what that definition is, and I know I'm coming from a place of like anti-racism is like using Kendi's example of like equity for all, right? I'm even coming to a place, especially after reading Cast, of instead of, why do I have to always have an identifier before my American, right? If I'm American, right? I can, why do we need to come in and have some sort of identifier? It's coming back to like, we are all people, we're all human. How can we all treat each other the same? And so I do think it's having the conversation. And I do know that, I mean, you know, like anytime you use racist or even the terminology, it's kind of like, how do you do it in a place that you're more comfortable with someone to be able to have that conversation? That's where, again, it's the deep, like you have trusting relationships. You have like, if you've developed, if you start having a relationship with someone, you know, you're going to come in and there's going to be vulnerability, and you're going to have to be able to be okay and say like, I mean, this whole process has taught me I have to unlearn and relearn. I have bought into assimilation. I have bought into that here in the United States and the different kinds of things. And so it's, how do I undo that? And then, but at the same time, understand that I want to live my life. I want to be able to have my dream. I want to be able to have relationships. I want to see where everyone can benefit from this world, not just, you know, one particular group or anything like that. So.
Nadine, in keeping with what you were saying, I'm just going to put something out there because working as a health coach, one of the things I try to do is help people not to label themselves, but to try to understand or notice what's behind the label. So, for example, I say somebody is an angry person. Well, they're not really an angry person. They're a person who has anger. And there's something under the anger. Could be fear, could be disappointment, could be regret, could be so many things. And I guess I get concerned about labels, whether we're saying racist or racism or black or white or anything else. We lose, we kind of, by doing that, we create other by labeling, just in the words we're using.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so what if we didn't use those labels and talked more about the behaviors, or talked more about the feelings or what's behind it? You know, and I think, you know, when the whole Black Lives Matter came out, you know, I immediately, my first thought was, all lives matter. It's every life. What are we doing? You know, but I also don't want to lose sight of the fact that it's being brought to our attention because it's so unjust. It's so unequal. There's a balance that needs to happen there. But I don't know. I just, again, it's just something that comes up for me all the time, because I think we all, I mean, I worked years ago with drug addicts and alcoholics, and to this day, if somebody says to me, introduces themselves as, I'm Joe, I'm an alcoholic. I'm like, no, Joe, you may have a problem with alcoholism. Who are you?
Right.
You know?
I would love for the day to be here that we're all Americans and we don't try to distinguish the background. And Aaron said he'd prefer that people just refer to him as American.
Right.
But we're not there yet, because until Black Lives Matter or all people of color lives matter, then we're not at the point to say all lives matter. That is true that all lives matter. But until Black lives and Hispanic lives and Asian lives matter, then we can't jump to that little tower place of saying all lives matter.
Yeah, but I'm saying, I think that even for myself, I'm much more inclined to package something very differently if there's a label on it.
Yes.
That's all I'm saying. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know how far, where this needs to be taken. I don't know. It just keeps coming up for me that as soon as I put a label on something, then that is so defined, it's so definite, and it doesn't allow us to be curious or want to be intimate with somebody to know more, understand better. It just stops our understanding, because we say, wow, we put angry in a bucket, or we put racist in a bucket, or we put something in a bucket. It's really losing the whole, it's like, well, wait a minute, let's explore, let's discover, let's dig deeper. And to your point, Aaron, at the beginning, it's sort of like, yeah, I want to fight for a cause, but I want to understand better, as you said, Lee, what's quantifiable? What is it that we're fighting? What exactly do we need to see to say there's change? What are those things? And rather than, looking, sometimes it's so overwhelming when you step back and look at the whole picture. It's so overwhelming. And so to your point, Anna, about, creating that ripple effect, it's just like, as a health coach, if I work with a person on making one slight change in their life, other things happen, other things change, other things become different for them. They gain a confidence, they feel more successful, they change how they see themselves. And I guess that's what I'm saying. And, over the last 6 months, I've gotten much more active with, groups or organizations that are, supporting things that I think matter. And, it may be just through the money that I donate, or it may be through some, getting involved with the conversation, just, like we are here. I don't know. It just.
Well, again, as Anna said, make a ripple. Let us not all shy away from the conversations that are possible around us. And speaking to Joyce's point, it is the people in power that can make a change. Our society, especially from the media point of view, has had enough of Black people complaining, quote unquote. And now it's time for white folks to complain. Because that's what will happen. But then there is another part that we haven't touched on, in my opinion. I don't want to deal too much with this because you can't really address this. There's a large part of this country that doesn't give a damn, can possibly even see the problem and still don't care. And I'm going to put that quantity of population in this country around 40%, because that's what Trump supporters are about. They have a system in place. They don't mind what it is. They don't care to change it. Yes, there may be racism involved, but this is what we do. This is how we live, et cetera, et cetera. And the apathy amongst at least 40% of the nation about racism is something that has to be fought against. How do you make these people understand that racism hurts our country? Racism devalues, it's like taking away half our population when we devalue women, for example. We lose power in every element of our segment that we marginalize. So, how do you get 40% of our population to realize that we're marginalizing a large segment of our population and getting them to care about it? Trump supporters don't care, even if they know that I may be labeling Trump supporters in a more broad fashion, but and I recognize the error of my words in doing that, but
Yeah,
but
because
I'm just trying to
we're trying to leave politics out of this, Lee. We're trying to
exactly
leave politics out.
exactly this is not about politics; it's about ideology. And so when we see groups like Proud Boys, and other militia groups, like I said, I live in New Hampshire. The conversation here can be very violent, and so and they just don't tolerate a diversity of thinking. In New England, there's only one right way to do anything. So, and New Hampshire is a bastion of that kind of thinking. So so how do you, combating all this? One, it takes courage, and and it takes a different sort of approach to bring Joyce's point into the fore. It takes those people who are part of the power structure to speak out against the power structure. I don't see any other way.
I still feel that it's still like one, I'm not even looking at the 40%. I don't care about them. I'm not going to change them. What I'm trying to do is show my heart to the people that I can show my heart to. I'm over 62. So, my life expectancy is sitting over there in the corner. I don't have time for BS. I don't have time to waste on trying to convince somebody. How does that song go? You can't make me love you. I can't make you love me if you don't. I'd rather stick with the people that love me and hope that others come along. But again, today, when I go out of here, once I leave this meeting, I will touch 5 people today with a smile, with a kind word, with a kind gesture, something.
Yes.
And that's what I worry about. I mean, I worked for a company. I'm not going to tell you the name of it, but I can tell you what the sentence is. It's, don't I see Negroes enjoying yard work? And when I used to do stand-up, that was my opening joke. And people got it. People got it. Because in a lot of people's head, the company that I worked for was a racist company.
Yeah.
They had no idea of my experience. They had no idea of Floyd Norman's experience. Floyd Norman was one of the animators that worked with Walt Disney. People, very few people know about him. So, instead of trying to, I'll sweep my porch and keep it clean. And that's my contribution to my neighborhood as a human being.
Good point.
Could I add something? As much as I love that whole notion of making a ripple, it in some way validates what I'm trying to say as a lily white person from a lily white community. I can go out every single day and be kind and nice and sweet and smile, and I will not see another Black human being. It's not going to improve the Black situation at all. They'll think I'm a really nice girl. I'm a really nice lady, but it in no way translates into anything racial because that is not in my world. It's not in my neighborhood. It's not in my grocery stores. It's not in my post office. It's not there. So for people who live in a more integrated area, yes, I can see that making a world of difference. But in my neighborhood, it would make no difference to the racial issue at all.
And that's where probably more of your outreach needs to be online. Or finding more integrated areas that are having some sort of events or something of that nature.
It's in those comments, Sue, that you talked about. It's in the comments that come out in the everyday conversation. And it's about the news and it's about what we see happening here and there. Those where the comments come out. And that's where people like me have to address them.
Exactly.
Here's the thing you probably don't know, Joyce, and I'm sure Lee can probably attest to this too, or maybe Aaron. I grew up in Birmingham, Chicago. I lived in Greece. I lived in Germany for a little bit. And so and then I came back to America. So I've been in California for the majority of my years out here. I can walk into a room, or I can tell when a white person walks into the room, who's been around different kinds of people and who hasn't. Your body language different. The whole thing, you know, of, I believe the propaganda wall goes up. You know, you've been indoctrinated for, you know, over half your life about Black people are scary, Black people, there's always a big Black guy, you know, and that's the big Black guy that kind of does all the stuff that they find out is, you know, it's not really a thing. But, you know, like there's always, you know, Black people steal, people do, not, you know, not looking at anything about, you talk about education. Now is the best time in the world for Black people to be educated. You don't need white people to be educated. You can do your own, you can do research online. There are books. People are now, we're past that gentleman's agreement about racism, where we used to say, well, you know, racism is there, but it's kind of okay. And we just, you know, we're done with that. And COVID-19 has put everybody on lockdown. You know, we have a chance to clean up our planet. We have a chance to clean up our hearts, and we have a chance to see some beautiful, positive things before we kick out of here. You know, we do.
Yes.
I'm done. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay.
No, I talk too much.
So we are kind of wrapping up on the time here. Is there anyone else that hasn't shared yet that would like to say something, either Nell or Leslie? Is there anything you want to pitch in on, or whatever? That would be great. Or anyone else in terms of some final points?
I find it very difficult to even start a conversation in this group, because I was born in Houston, Texas, and I grew up in the South, and I graduated from the University of Georgia. And for the most part, none of you want to know what I saw or experienced. I personally experienced abuse and witnessed torture and abuse of people of color and murder. So to begin a conversation for me is very hard still. I have never understood any of this, really. I never understood it as a child. When I was in college, I marched against segregation and prejudice and Vietnam War, and, you know, I'm old, I'm 73. I became a social worker, and I spent my social work career, for the most part, absolutely loving my clients, no matter who they were. There were certainly clients where I knew things weren't going to go well, and they didn't. But for the most part, I fell in love with those people, no matter what their background or circumstances or color. But now I live in rural Iowa. I've lived in many places in the world and traveled a lot. I've always innately felt this is the family of man. This is my family. I have always loved other cultures and learning about other cultures and other people, no matter what their color. I strongly identify with the Aborigine in Australia and have spent time there and want to go back. And my ashes will be taken to Uluru and scattered there. So this is a really hard subject for me, and I never knew it till just the last few months. And I feel like I experienced so much of what Black people experience. Only my one, I hate to say it, saving grace was that I had white skin, and it probably kept me from dying as a child. And so it's a really hard subject. I live in a small rural town where there probably, I don't think there are 20 people of color in this town. And I live in I will just say this, I live in a part of America which is largely supportive of the present administration. And so it also is the threat of people coming after you. And I feel like I've been making ripples all my life. You know, I really, for the most part, except for the last 4 years, I've always loved people, and I've always been outgoing, and I've always been, I just feel like I've made a lot of ripples. I retired 3 years ago, and I still have adult clients who started with me as children who still stay in touch with me. And so to move forward, I certainly intend to keep making ripples as much as I can. It's a very hard thing. And it also triggers what I went through growing up and as a young woman in the state of Georgia.
Thank you, Nell. I know that was very courageous of you to speak up as much as you did. And so really ground yourself, take some nice deep breaths, and remember to ground yourself, because I know this stirs up a lot of things for you. And for me, even as a child, and I mentioned this last time in the last one, I actually smacked my grandmother in the face because she used the N-word, and I got in deep trouble with my parents. So I don't know how I came in sort of just saying things need to be right, things need to be fair and just, but I did somehow. And I grew up in a pretty much all-white community in rural Western New York. But I think we each can make our ripple in our own way, and we need to. And for anyone who doesn't live in an area where you can do it actively in your community, it's got to be the online community. And I just wanted to let people know that this video will go on our YouTube channel, and the prior one is already there. And then my original anti-racism video that I did before that. So this will make 3 of them. And in that we did kind of set forth the definition of racism and things of that nature. So the video was maybe 20 minutes long. The first meeting was a little over an hour. This one's an hour and a half. So if there are those of you that want to just share those videos with other people, that's even a step. They can witness the conversation. And even though today's group is definitely much smaller than the prior group, I still think probably more people have been watching it on YouTube after the fact. And we don't know what our role is particularly perfectly, but Aaron has probably some.
So one of the things that we were talking about a little bit ago was the label. So I think one of the things that we can all do is make an effort to stamp out the label. So we can do that by recognizing each other as Americans and not black or white or Jewish or whatever label there is. And we have to try to educate others about that same thing. So if that's going to be our ripple, that we are going to recognize people of color as Americans. So if we are doing that, if we are saying black or Hispanic or Indian or whatever American, then that's where we start. We change that in ourselves so that we just refer to everyone as American, because we are all American and that's all we need to be. And the diversity of a color of our skin, our hair and other things just becomes part of that melting pot of society that we are striving to be in the first place. We've always said that the US was a melting pot. Okay, so in order to be the melting pot, when you put everything in the pot, labels go away.
Because it becomes a soup or a stew
Exactly.
instead of the separate parts. And I totally agree with what Aaron is saying, but I don't want to lose the attention of the gifts that someone brings because of differences. So the labels don't need to be there. That's great. Leave off those adjectives that kind of separate. But let's ask each human being, well, where do you come from? Like, what's your perspective on this? How did your beliefs form? What kind of a life did you grow up in? Because that uniqueness that we each come in with, I don't want to lose sight of that. Even though I agree, saying we're all American is the most important thing. But let's ask people, what do you think about this? Have you had any experience with this? So I think the uniqueness needs to stay, even though the label, because I lived in France for a while. Yeah, they just called themselves French. It didn't matter what their ethnicity was. And Aaron, when he lived in Germany, we're Germans. You know, that's the way it should be. We're Americans, but we are each unique, and we don't want to neglect to ask someone about what their uniqueness might bring to the equation.
Yeah. And of course, for those of you that have traveled overseas, you recognize that, like when I was in Germany, they did not look at us as black or white or Hispanic Americans. We were just all Americans.
Exactly.
Sometimes that carries a bad connotation too.
Well, there have been cycles where that's good to be American and cycles where it's not good to be American.
Sometimes I don't want them to know I'm American.
Yes, we have our moments, don't we?
Travel with a Canadian flag, it'll help you.
Yeah.
I call myself Jamaican so I can avoid being American.
All right. You got to get the accent down, though, man.
I love Jamaica. Loved it.
I want first, before we go away, I want to thank everybody. You guys have enlightened my whole weekend. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank all of you so much too for coming forward. And then so our YouTube channel to see this recording or share it is The Way to Balance, THEWAYTOBALANCE LLC, and it's all squished together like one word. And that way you can see it there. There's other events and things that are on our website calendar, and that's thewaytobalance.com without the LLC in there. And it was our original intention to do the first round table, and that was the end of it. And then people asked for us to do the second one. We don't have another one. Well, we don't have as many participants this time, so I think we'll have you guys drive it in terms of whether we do occasionally do this again, because I think this has been a very authentic and open-hearted discussion, which I think is great.
I'd like to ask a question if I can. It's a rather abstract question and may not touch us as deeply as some of the other topics have. But I'm looking at this group here, all of your pictures on my screen right now. And I am noticing that for the most part, we're all older folks. Now, Joyce will understand
young chick.
Joyce will understand why I'm asking such a question. She knows what my my interests are. But I was wondering, this whole thing about racism is the understanding that we all must come to, and seeing racism for what it has been and the damage it has caused. Does it require a level of maturity or spirituality in order to understand this?
That's a really good question. Because, it's an excellent question. And I don't know that I know the answer, but I've met so many young people that are in their teens and 20s that do get it. They totally understand, and they treat everyone equally. So I'm not so sure it takes, in some cases it does take a level of maturity, but I've met a whole bunch of 20-somethings and 30-somethings that are like, I am just appalled that people are treating each other this way. And they just assumed that we're all being treated equally. So I think it's a blend. Maybe
I think I'm going to agree. I've seen this movement come from young and old alike. So I'm not sure if my question is really relevant. I may be trying to stratify in ways that is not appropriate.
Okay. And Lee, I just want to finish up by saying you're never too old to be young.
Yes.
Believe me, I am 70 years old. I know that.
I know. I'm just saying, I got a cup from my daughter recently because I'm 73, and I'm always saying, age doesn't define my health or the quality of my life. I don't even think about age. And she got me this cup that says, "You're never too old to be young." And I said, "Thank you."
Right.
Visit my YouTube channel. You'll see something that might surprise you.
Okay.
All right. So I think we're gonna start our Ripple. I'm gonna go out and find a bottle somewhere. There's got to be a bottle of Ripple still on the shelf.
Oh no, no.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah, I did think of that funny thing, you know, when Anna first brought that up. It's like, Ripple. I think I remember that name from when I was a teenager.
I got a bottle in my refrigerator. Don't talk about it.
All right. Well, thank you so much. So
Thank you so much.
if you do feel drawn to us continuing this dialogue, just email our office, info@thewaytobalance.com, and let us know. Veronica's plan is to automatically add all of you that have participated today to just an email list on this topic. So she may just reach out and say, answer if you're interested, because I think everyone's email was probably attached to the Zoom registration, and she'll probably get that out sometime this week. But again, thank you all. This has been great. And let's keep on doing what we're doing and even more.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting.
All right.
Absolutely welcome.
Everyone have a great day.
Bye, everybody.
Okay, bye.
How do I?
The lower right screen is how you end the, I'm ending the meeting, but it'll shut off when I do that. But when you want to back out, it's the lower right when you move your mouse there.
Okay.
All right, bye.
Take care, guys.
You too, thanks.